Welcome to my porch. Got my iced tea and we're ready for the porch talk today. You know, we've been involved in a series entitled Rise, and we've been talking specifically about unpacking all the impact that this virus is having on our culture. In fact, we started out by saying rise to continue your focus. Make sure you don't let the virus establish what you're focused on. Instead, stay focused on the purpose God has for you. And then we said rise to come alive. Remember, it was Easter Sunday, and we talked about the fact that, yes, we are a culture now enamored with death. Every news program talks about how many people have died. Well, in Jesus, death does not control us, and we can come alive to really live. And so we said rise to come alive. And then we talked about rise to connect with friends. One of the epidemics that's impacting this pandemic called COVID-19 is the epidemic of loneliness. And we want to help you, encourage you to stay connected with people so that you do not develop an overwhelming sense of loneliness. It's okay to be alone. Alone's all right, as long as you're alone with the Lord. And then we talked about connect to claim your future. God in Jeremiah 29:11 says, I have a future for you, and that future is shaped by hope and by peace. Today is Mother's Day, and I want to wish you a very happy Mother's Day. All you mothers that are watching, we thank God for you so much. And in light of that, we've also seen a dramatic impact that this virus is having on our families and on our culture. People are having to shelter in place together, and they're discovering in their families things that they're having to deal with that they never imagined they'd have to deal with. And so, mothers, I want to talk to you a little bit today. And I also want to talk to those of you who've come to grips with the fact that there is some brokenness in your family. I want to talk about how to fix a broken family. And I want to talk with you today about rise to choose your family. You know, we're using Romans 8:37 as kind of our guide verse. And it says, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him, Jesus, who loved us. And my encouragement to you is this. Please, whatever you've encountered, whatever you're going through, and whatever you've seen that you've had to deal with in your family, please let Jesus fix what is broken. I want to talk to you today about what it takes to fix a broken family. You know, people confronted Jesus on one occasion and said he was using the power of Satan to cast out demons. And Jesus said something very interesting. The scripture says in Matthew 12:25, knowing their thoughts, he said to them, every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house, and the word house there means family, no city or family divided against itself will stand. You know, in the midst of this coronavirus, in the midst of this COVID-19, no doubt your family has experienced some challenges in and of itself. And I think I'm seeing two reactions on the part of people in terms of the shelter in place, the quarantines, and everything else that are happening. Some people are celebrating the closeness that their family is experiencing as a result of getting rid of some of the distractions in life. And others are struggling with what they perceive to be as brokenness in their families, of what they perceive to be problems that they're facing. You know, today I want to talk to you about how to fix those problems in your family. And literally these principles apply to any relationship at all. But in light of Mother's Day, you know, you can't take your mom out to eat today, but you can express your love. And moms, I want to talk to you especially. I want to challenge you. Coming out of the impact of this virus on our culture, rise up and claim your family. Rise and choose your family. And rise and make your family what it can be and what it should be. I want you to notice that there are three actions you must take to fix a broken family. Three specific things. Let's look at them together. Number one, the first thing I want you to see is determine why things go wrong in your family. Determine why things go wrong in your family. You know, often families have problems and it's a recurring pattern. James chapter 4 verse 1 says it this way, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you. And that word passions there means desires. In essence, what it's saying is this. Isn't the reason that there's so much quarreling going on, isn't the reason that there's so much dissension going on because of the selfish desires that are warring inside that family or inside that group? You know, what causes things to go wrong in most families? Selfish and competing desires. I want what I want, you want what you want. We have competing desires, and our selfishness can take over. Folks, it's why they have dual controls on electric blankets, because we have a hard time agreeing on different things. You know, like, how do you put the toilet paper, when you have toilet paper, how do you put it on the roll? Does it come over the top or does it go under the bottom? Well, I mean, that may sound silly, but we're all different. We have different ideas about how to do things. And it's when we insist on having our own way, when we insist on being selfish, that selfishness can destroy a family. Listen, the longer you're married, the better you get to know a person. And the better you get to know your mate, the more differences you're going to recognize between the two of you. And the more differences you recognize between the two of you, the more opportunities there are for things to go wrong. And you're going to find yourself in the midst of situations where your selfishness can take over if you're not careful. You see, our first concern often in our family that we project onto our family members is, how am I going to get my needs met? How am I going to get done what I want to get done? I mean, think about the last problem your family dealt with, even as a result of maybe being together so much. Whatever it was over, whether it was money or how to discipline kids or what you were going to do next by way of an activity, or whether you thought your parents even were being too strict and restricting your freedom, if you think about it, and you think about all of that and all of the problems that you were dealing with, it really gets down to selfishness. I want my way, I demand my way, and the selfishness that demands your wants take precedence over the needs of others. And so when we sit down and we look at this first action for determining why things go wrong in your family, we've got to address the principle that's very clear. It's selfishness that destroys families. If the truth were known, as a result of the closeness that has developed in the atmosphere created by this virus, you've seen a whole lot more selfishness that you've had to deal with, maybe in yourself and maybe in your family members. So, number one, determine why things go wrong in your family. And the answer to that is selfishness. Selfishness destroys families. Number two, the second thing that you can do to take an action to make sure that you choose your family and that your response coming out of this virus is to make your family a priority. The second action, not only determine why things go wrong in your family, selfishness, but number two, decide to fix your family. Make the decision that you're going to do whatever is necessary to correct whatever you've been dealing with in your family. In fact, the Bible says it this way in Psalm 139, in verse 23 through 24. It says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." You see, this is a prayer to be prayed to get below your actions. It gets all the way to your motivations. Sometimes we don't like to deal with personal, relational problems because we don't like seeing our own motivations exposed. We don't like seeing our own challenges exposed and what we're going through and what we're experiencing. You've got to deal with your motivations and your anxieties. You see, if your motivations are right, your actions will be right. If your motivations are right, your response to your family's problems will be right. You will deal with those things that make you anxious about your family. We all have some tendency to deal with our challenges that we face as a family. But I want you to notice there are 5 possible responses to your family's challenges. When we talk about fixing your family, there are 5 possible ways that you can respond. Let's look at them quickly. First of all, number 1, it's my way or nothing else. My way. You always get your way no matter the cost. In other words, it's when you face problems, you're going to be 100% right 100% of the time. And the problem with this, let me tell you what's going to happen with that response. You're going to end up a bitter, lonely old person because you will isolate yourself from everybody that loves you and especially from all your family members. The second way that we respond is no way. In other words, you always back off no matter what the situation may be. When you face problems, you run from them as fast and as hard as you can. You don't want to deal with anything. You don't want to deal with any problems. You'll do anything and everything you can to make sure you're not involved. In fact, some of you think you don't have any problems because this is how you handle everything. You run away from it. The problem with this response is it will build up on you because you never allow anything to get resolved. The third way often that we respond to our family's challenges is see your way. And that is you always give in no matter the person. You see, when you face problems, you just give in. You just throw your hands up and you just say to the other person, you just have it your way. You just do whatever you want to do. Let me tell you, can I tell you honestly what I see going on in our culture or what I saw going on before the virus took place and we had much more personal interaction? Let me tell you what I saw. I saw parents reacting this way to their children. In exasperation, they just throw their hands up and they give in to their children, and their children end up defining and setting the priority for the family. The problem with this response is if you keep responding to your family problems in this way, then a wall of bitterness begins to grow in you day by day, and you may keep it buried for days or months or years. But let me tell you what's going to happen. It's eventually going to explode on you. And when it does, it'll be a mess. There's a fourth way you can respond to the challenges in your family, and that is halfway. And let me tell you what happens there. You always keep score no matter the decision. In other words, you've got your ideas, I've got my ideas. Let's reach a compromise. You win some, you lose some. It's okay. You keep score. Listen, that's better than the first three ways to handle challenges in your family, but it's still not the best way because it's still selfish. You're going to end up keeping score, and you're going to end up not arriving at the best solution for your family. Mom, I want to challenge you on something here. Moms so often end up being the catalyst for compromise in the family. Let me challenge you to do something else. Let me challenge you, and let me challenge you dads, to not settle for my way, no way, your way, or halfway. Let's move all the way to the one that offers solutions. And that's E. Number 5, our way. And let me tell you what defines that. You always ask God, no matter the feelings. You seek God's solution for whatever situation you may be facing. When you face family problems, you pray about it. You respect the needs of the other person. And together, y'all seek God's will. No solutions are arrived at selfishly, but instead laying everything on the table and seeking God's way. And you work on it together. That's how you reach a resolution to the situation. All right, so when we talk about fixing a broken family, and Mom, look, I get it. You're going to be the one that more often than not is the catalyst for taking action. And so there are 3 actions you must take to fix your broken family. First of all, determine why things go wrong in your family. Second of all, decide to fix your family. And this is the one I want to camp out on. And Mom, this is the one I want to challenge you. And Dad, I want to challenge you as well to make this your priority. Number 3, do what God says about your family. And look, what's the culture going to give you by way of guidance for your family? It's going to be messed up any way you cut it. Even friends that are not seeking the will of God are going to be messed up in what they give you by way of offering advice on how to help your family. By all means, go to the internet. They're always right, aren't they? No. Look, let's do what God says that will make your family the very best that it could be. And what does God say? Well, I want you to notice, we're going to look together. In James 1:22, he says, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Do what God says, and you can fix whatever you're facing as a family. You can fix whatever challenge there are. So how do we go about doing this? Well, quickly, I want to take you through what I believe God would say about how to fix our families as we emerge from the impact of this virus. There are 8 steps involved in doing family the right way. 8 steps involved in doing family the right way. Mom, take heart. Please hear me. You can fix what you're dealing with in your family. And if you will take these 8 steps, I promise you, God will be there to help you. Let's look at them. Number 1, the first one I want you to see, step number 1, is let God have your life. Let God have your life. The Bible says in Colossians chapter 1, verse 20, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of the cross. And you, who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds. In other words, he says, commit your life to Jesus. Because let me tell you, the greatest alienation that is occurring in the world today is not the alienation between family members. It's the alienation between man and God. And so if we're going to resolve the challenging situations that exist in the interpersonal relationships that we have, especially in those relationships within the family, then we have to begin by dealing with the fact that there is a decided separation from God, and it is Jesus who came to settle the problem between man and God. To, as Colossians chapter 1 says, to reconcile to himself all things, to ensure that those relationships are healed, to ensure that we know that we are living out the purpose that God has for us. You know, most of the problems, in all honesty, and I'm not trying to oversimplify this thing, so please hear me. Most of the problems that we encounter in our families could be solved if each family member had an abiding, ongoing relationship with Jesus Christ and was seeking to be a fully devoted follower of Jesus. Because when we are seeking to follow Jesus with all our heart and with everything that we are, it's amazing how the selfishness melts away and how we can in fact live in concert and in peace with each other. Surrendering to Jesus brings forgiveness into my life. And it shows me the power of forgiveness that I can then share with others, because I know him personally and have experienced that forgiveness. So step number 1, and it's vital, let God have your life. And please hear me. If you've never come to know Jesus personally, please hear me. You can ask him right now to come into your heart and to forgive you and come to know him personally, and then be empowered to forgive others. Step number 2, not only let God have your life, but step number 2, let God have your family. Let God have your family. Listen, pray before you talk to your family. Let God be in control of your family. And ask for wisdom. James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. I pray for wisdom for my family, for myself in dealing with my family every day. Because, hey, it doesn't matter who you are. There are going to be conflicts in your family. There are going to be issues to have to deal with. There are going to be things that you have to deal with as well. You want to know how to handle those problems? You want to know how to handle those challenges that arise? Ask God. He gives answers generously. He'll give you his wisdom if you ask. You know, hey, look, Jesus is ready to forgive. He's totally understanding. He's unendingly patient. He is invariably tender and loving. He is unfailing in every area. He anticipates every need. You say, that's who I want to marry. I understand. But you can't marry Jesus. And the person you're married to will never live up to what Jesus can do and provide to you. So quit trying to make them do that for you. You see, so many times we have expectations that are much higher than they need to be when it comes to our family members and in dealing with our family members. Because there's some myths about family and marriage. Myth number one is, well, if I can just get married, I'll have all my needs met. Yeah, really? Come on. Be real. No one person can meet all your needs ever at any time. Only God can do that. And let me tell you the second myth. Well, if I just marry the right person, then all my needs will be met. No, no, no. The issue is not marrying the right person. The issue is being the right person. And the way you can be the right person is live in accordance with God's will in your life. Don't expect any human member of your family to do what only God can do and to provide for you what only God can provide for you. If you're going to avoid recurring problems, you have to address them. But you have to address them from the context of having given your life to God and having given your family to God. Number three, step three, lay down ground rules. Lay down ground rules. You know, listen, hey, come on. Even countries, when they have conflict between them, lay down ground rules. In other words, they say, look, there's certain weapons we're not going to use because if we use those weapons, we're absolutely going to destroy each other. You need to do the same thing in your family. You know what the Bible says? It says in Ephesians 4:31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you along with malice. In other words, put away rage and wrath. Put away clamor, this quarreling and bickering. Put away any slander that you would say about another person. Put away all malice or dislike of others. Let me distill this down to the basic porch talk understanding of what that means. It means don't talk bad to each other and don't talk bad about each other. If you really want to handle situations within your family, then you have to lay down ground rules. And the ground rules, bottom line, really are respect each other and be honest. In fact, let me share with you a few little ground rules we've got in our family that work really well. The first ground rule is when you're in the middle of a conflict and you realize all of a sudden that you're wrong, admit it. I'm going to tell you why we have that ground rule. This ground rule is primarily for me. Because let me tell you what I'm a master at in our family. If I'm losing an argument, I'll change the argument to one I can win. Listen, that doesn't help anybody. And I'm beginning to learn at 66 years of age that winning is not what it's all about. The preservation of relationships is what it's all about. You see, we can complicate the problem by trying that diversionary tactic, but it doesn't help. Another ground rule we lay down is never say never or always. How many times have you heard this? Well, you never do thus and such. Or you always react this way or that way. Or, tell me what I've reacted that way. Well, there was one time 12 years ago. And then you end up arguing about what happened 12 years ago. No. Strike that. Never say never or always. Another ground rule that's useful is just say what you mean. Be honest. I'm going to tell you one of the most unfair things that is said many times in a conflict within a family. And that is you get into a discussion and the other person in the conflict looks at you and says, well, you know what I mean. Or if you loved me, you would understand me and know what I mean. Or you know what I'm talking about. No, we don't. We cannot read your mind. And you cannot read our minds. Just be honest. Say what you're thinking. And lay it on the table. Listen, if you're upset about your wife's lack of attention, don't complain about her cooking. Or if you're upset about something else, don't complain about this thing or that thing. Just simply be honest. Just say it like it is. And lay down these ground rules so that when you interact with each other, you're interacting with each other honestly. So, how do we do what God says in our family? First of all, let God have your life. Secondly, let God have your family. Step 3, lay down ground rules. Step 4, big one, listen more than you talk. Listen more than you talk. Let me tell you what this is really all about. This is really all about showing respect. Sometimes when we are losing in a conflict, we just ramp it up. It's kind of like Lucy said in a Peanuts cartoon one time, if I can't be right, I'm going to be wrong at the top of my lungs. And a lot of people have that approach. Listen. Simply listen. That's why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you'll listen more than you talk. Listen to what other people in the family are saying. Listen to how they feel. You know, sitting on the porch one time talking to an old timer, you know what he told me? You lose ground when you throw mud. And you do lose ground, and your family loses ground. So please, before you even begin a conversation or talking, listen more than you think. Listen more, than you talk. You know what Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 5 says? It says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than ourselves. In other words, in humility put others above yourself. It said, let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. In other words, don't just look out for yourself. And then verse 5, have this mind among you, which is also in Christ Jesus. Be like Jesus and put others above yourself. Doesn't mean you lose. It means in the process, you'll find yourself gaining ground because the family in total wins. I like that word look in verse 5. It says, let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interests of others. In the original language, it's the word skopos, from which we get our word scope, rifle scope, telescope, microscope. Something that brings something in closer so that you can see it. In other words, what you're doing is when you look out for the interests of others and not your own interests, you're looking more closely at what they're going through and what they're experiencing. You're focusing in on the needs of others by listening to them and hearing what they had to say. I mean, if you could stop for just 5 seconds worrying about getting your own needs met and just think about the other person's needs and listen to what they have to say. In fact, Jesus said that's important because he said in Matthew 7, why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye? That's verse 3. But do not notice the log that is in your own eye. Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and there's a big old log in your eye? Jesus said, you hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. You see, have you ever gotten involved in an argument where you're pointing out the wood you see in other people's arguments and eyes, and you say, you do this and you do that, and you're pointing out all these things? It doesn't work. It just intensifies the problem. Ask yourself first, and this is what Jesus is saying, where am I wrong? Jesus is saying the tiniest speck of wrong will blind you if you're not careful, and you won't be able to hear what the real need is. Listen, I don't mean to burst your bubble, but you're not perfect. Please hear me. Please listen to me. Mom, please hear what I'm saying. Give your children, if you give them nothing else, give them a praying mother with a listening ear. Help them know that they can come to you and you will listen to them, no matter what their need is, and you will pray for them. Don't develop blind spots that will keep you from seeing their needs. But if you will listen to them and pray for them and help them deal with whatever they're facing, you may find out there's some things that you have to deal with yourself. Let me tell you some of the most powerful words in any family. The most powerful words you can say is, I'm sorry. Whenever you make a mistake, I'm sorry. Or, I was only thinking of myself. Or, help me see things as you do. You know, sometimes the most important thing you can do is just call a family conference, a peace conference, and sit down and say, help me see things the way you see them. Help me to understand what you're going through. And get ready. It could be one of the greatest blessings you've ever experienced. How do we do what God says with the family? Let God have your life. Let God have your family. Lay down ground rules. Listen more than you talk. And step number 5, look at the problem together. Everything leads up to this step. Everything. This has to be your motivation. Matthew chapter 5. Jesus says in verse 23, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift before the altar and go first be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. Listen, if you come to drive-in church and you got a problem with a family member, get it resolved. Just get it taken care of. How many of you have ever gotten into a family conflict on the way to church? Happened all the time, didn't it? See, Jesus is saying here, your family problem deserves your immediate and total attention, and it will not be resolved by accident. You cannot choose your family by accident or by proxy. It has to be done deliberately. Go and settle whatever the situation is that you need to deal with. Jesus said the only way to deal with your problem is to face it. That's the only way to solve it. You can't worship God until you have done all you can to settle the problems within your own family. Go resolve it with your brother. Now, look, listen to me. You got to choose the right time and you got to choose the right place. And you don't do it in a way that's going to embarrass your family members. And don't do it by using other people in the process. Ephesians 4:6 says, in your anger don't sin and don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. What God's saying there is don't let your problem linger. What happened? Let me tell you what happened to some of you when this virus erupted in our culture. All of a sudden you found yourself in a position where you had to shelter in place with your family. And things that you had been avoiding could no longer be avoided. And now you've got to deal with them. So please, please deal with it God's way and look at the problem together. And then step number 6, learn from others. Learn from others. I mean, you may feel stuck. You may feel that you need help. I was meeting with a young family today that's having a crisis with their oldest child. And we talked about how to deal with that and what they needed to do. You know, you may need to get help from somewhere. Proverbs 13:10 says, by insolence comes nothing but strife, but with those who take advice is wisdom. Get advice. If you need money advice, you go to a counselor who can provide you with that kind of advice. If you need advice on how to handle a health problem situation, you go to the doctor. If you got a legal problem, you go to the attorney. If you have a family problem, seek out an expert. You say, well, where do I find an expert in family problems? Let me tell you where you find your best expert sometime. Find a godly senior adult that has walked through raising their family and has given Jesus Christ the preeminence in their lives and in their family. And sit down with them and seek their advice. There's a lot of wisdom to be found from those who have been through crises and situations. Take the advice of this message. I'm going to tell you, I spent a lot of time praying over this because I have a strong burden that if we will handle coming out of this virus correctly, it could be a revival for families in this nation. You do realize that pre-coronavirus, the family was non-existent in America. I mean, the nuclear family was gone. And now all of a sudden families are being forced to be together. And just maybe coming out of this, maybe, Mom, you will come to realize that you need to rise to choose your family above all else. Get help wherever you can get it. Join a small group at church. Be involved in getting online with folks who have a deep walk with Jesus Christ. Seek advice and be humble enough in the Spirit to listen to it. And then that brings us to step number 7. Once you get that advice that you can learn from others, step number 7, live out the answer. Live out the answer. Listen to what Jesus says. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them. You get that? People who hear what I'm saying and they do what I'm saying will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And that word house is the same word for family. Those who hear what Jesus is saying and they do what Jesus is saying will build their family on a rock. The rain will fall, and the floods of viruses and cultures will rise, and the winds will blow and beat on that family, but it will not fall because it's been founded on the rock. It's wise to do what God says. It's foolish to ignore Him. And sometimes God will show you that the source of your family problems is not necessarily what you're going through, but it could be even yourself. Just do what He says. Build your home, build your family on the rock. You know, let me tell you what I've seen happen a lot of times. Families are in a crisis, marriages in a crisis. They go to a counselor to get help, and as soon as the counselor gets close to the problem and starts suggesting the changes that need to be made, the one who needs to change often gives up and says, I've had enough, and they walk away. Don't do that. Don't refuse to live out the answer that God gives you. Trust your family into His hands and let Him show you what needs to be done. And finally, step number 8. Last through. Galatians chapter 6 verse 9 says, and let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. Listen, don't give up. Don't walk out in the middle of seeking a resolution to the problem, the situation that you're going through. Don't quit, but consistently and constantly continue to seek God's will. Do what God says. So how do we fix broken families? Well, first of all, you got to determine there's a problem. Second of all, you got to decide that you're going to fix it. And then third of all, you just got to do what's right. Do what God says to fix it. And what does God say? Step 1, you give your life to God through coming into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Step 2, you let God have your family. Step 3, lay down the ground rules. Step 4, listen more than you talk. Step 5, look at the problem together as a family. Step 6, learn from others. Step 7, live out the answer. And step 8, last through. All the way, go through it. You know, a lot of families get bogged down at determining there is a problem, and they never really get into the process of doing what God says, because to do what God says means surrender. You've got to surrender your life personally to Jesus Christ and surrender your family to His control. I am speaking to some folks right now, and the truth of the matter is the reason you're having problems in your family is because you've never made a surrender of your life personally to Jesus Christ. You can't surrender your family to God because He doesn't have your life. Jesus said, I stand at the door and knock. Isn't it interesting? He uses the analogy, the metaphor of the door of a house that houses a family. He's standing at the door of your family and He's knocking, and He wants to enter. But the only way He can get in is through your heart. And before you can open the door to your family, you have to open the door to your own heart and invite Jesus Christ to come in. You know, I prayed with that young man today, and he gave his heart to Jesus, realizing that his family needed a husband and father who was led by Jesus Christ. Mom, do you know Jesus? No. I'm not talking about a casual relationship. I'm talking about letting Him know you because you've invited Him to come into your life. If you've never made that step, Mom, Dad, children, why don't you ask Him right now? Maybe even you as a family can make this individual decision together. Right now, would you bow your head with me? Close your eyes. Just right now. Right now. If you would like to let God have control of your life and take the first step of letting Him have control of your family, then right now, just pray this prayer with me. Pray it out loud. He'll hear you. Dear Jesus, I'm sorry for for the sin in my life and for the mistakes that I've made. Please forgive me. And right now, Jesus, I open the door of my heart and invite you to come into my life. I surrender to you, Jesus, asking you to forgive me and to save me. Thank you, Jesus. Listen, if you just prayed that prayer with me and you meant it with all your heart, would you do me a favor? Just go to the link that's just below this video that you're watching. Click on that link and just type in there, I prayed to receive Jesus. We'll get back in touch with you. We're not going to ask you for anything, but we want to help you know the steps that you can take to become a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ, to know Him engaged in your everyday life and in your family. Please hear me. Jesus loves you. And as you go through the process of emerging from this virus, after you've had to face life-challenging issues, personally and in your family, don't go back to the old normal. Make a new normal of walking every day with Jesus Christ. If you've got a prayer request, put it on the link below. Let us know how we can pray for you. Or if you have a need, put it on that link as well, so we can know how we can best serve you and help you encounter Jesus. God bless you. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for being a part of our Porch Talks. Please share it with your friends. Share it with family members. Share it with whomever you choose. We want more than anything else for people to encounter Jesus. God bless you. Stay safe and know that Jesus and I love you very much.